Hey guys, and welcome to October's House, the place where we talk all TV, cinema, and horror. If you already clicked on the video, you know what we're reviewing today, and that is 2024's Presents, directed by Steven Soderbergh. I remember seeing the trailer for this attached to Nosferatu, and I thought, oh, that looks really good, I'm really excited for that one. And as soon as I left the cinema, it just kind of slipped my mind. And when it came to the cinema, I kind of missed my opportunity to watch it. So with it hitting streaming on February the 25th, I finally got around to seeing it. As I said, it kind of slipped my mind a bit, but I had seen a few people mention it here and there, but I couldn't really remember much about the trailer, so I went into this pretty much blind. It was only after I had seen the movie that I noticed that there was quite a mixed reception for it, and I do think that there are a few things to blame for that, and we will get into it a little bit more in detail later on in the video. But I do generally think that it was down to the marketing and it kind of selling it as something that it wasn't. Now, with all that out of the way, let's get into it. So on paper, this is your typical haunted house story. A family moves into a house and starts to realize that they might not be alone. However, this is far from typical. The big gimmick of this movie is that the entire movie is shot from the perspective of the present. Now, I had completely forgot about this, and it was quite surprising when I started the movie, but the opening shot is so gorgeous that you just get swept up in it straight away. With a simple premise but a very unique and interesting approach, I do think that this movie was set up from the start to at the very least be decent. So let's talk about why it exceeded my expectations and really went above them. So what really got me from the start was the tone and the styling of this movie. What we get is a contemporary gothic horror that has an identity that is so established, so clean, and so polished. It runs so deep throughout this entire movie. It takes every single component and polishes them to the highest standard, and you're like kind of dragged in and you don't even realize it, and then all of a sudden you can't get out. The music is so hauntingly beautiful and it kind of floats through the movie along with the perspective, and it really adds another layer to the disconcerting feeling. The house is so bare and empty, but even when the family move in, it's huge, it's spacious, it's open, and when we travel around it from the perspective of the presence, you're constantly kind of questioning why you're there, why this is happening, and you're doing it in a kind of subconscious way, and because of that, the atmosphere of confusion really starts to weigh on you, and before you know it, you're halfway into this movie and you're just stuck in this kind of dense and heavy cloud of discomfort. It really has a way of getting under your skin, and it really starts to double down on that when it starts to utilize all of these different components to tell its story. As I said, the setup and premise is pretty typical. It's your average haunted house story. A family moves into a new home and they slowly start to come to the realization that there's something else in the house with them. But honestly, that's where the normality ends. From the perspective of the present, we are watching this family's day-to-day lives unfold, and there's a lot of friction there, but you can also tell that there's a lot of love there too. And I personally think that that's where another strength of the movie is, and I know that some other people don't agree with this, but I think that the family drama really pushes this movie forward. We see the daughter Chloe struggling with the grief and loss of her best friend to an OD, whilst also navigating her relationships with her douchebag brother Tyler, her workaholic inattentive mother Rebecca, and her dad Chris, who's doing his absolute best to hold this family together. And we really do see some interesting dynamics between them all. Chloe is the first to feel the presence, and she believes that it's her friend. And the film really drip feeds you information at such a glacial and slow pace. It really makes you feel like there's something wrong and there's something bad's about to happen, but you don't know what and you don't know why, and in this kind of state of desperation to know, and it really leans into this era of confusion. The film crescendos into this really visceral and disturbing finale, but then ends with one of the most lamenting and gorgeous scenes. I think that the cast is really incredible here, and I do think that that's a bit of a controversial thing to say, but I do think that there are some really great performances here. Lucy Liu is an icon, we all know this, but in this movie she portrays her character really well. I think Chris Sullivan really portrays loving, supportive father trying his best well. And I think Eddie Medei plays a believable douchebag teenager that toes the line of being comical. My standout here though is Kalina Liang as Chloe. I think that her portrayal of grief is really subtle but so effective. My one big gripe with this movie though is the writing, and I think that it's something that a lot of people have issues with. And when I say writing, I don't necessarily mean the story, because I think the story is beautifully written. It's the dialogue between the characters, and it's not every conversation, it's not every line, but there are some lines peppered throughout this movie that are just not performed well and not written well, and I think it becomes especially obvious when we look at Wes Mulholland's portrayal of Ryan. Some of his lines are just downright bad and the most egregious, and I think it's kind of difficult to pin it down because of the context of his character, but I do think that there could have been a few lines that could have just been dialed back, played a little bit more subtle and a bit more nuanced to kind of blend it in with the rest of the film. Having said that, his performance towards the end of the film is so dark and gross that he did kind of pull it back a bit. But with all of that being said, there are some incredible conversations happening in this film. There are some conversations that are so evocative and thought-provoking and effective that I do think that it balances it out. I don't see too much of an issue with the acting in this film, but it's the dialogue. That's where the issues lie. For fans of a certain type of horror, this is one of the best to do it, hands down. If you aren't a fan of those kinds of films, this is going to be a bit more difficult to digest. It's a sorrowful slow burn that kind of suffocates you in the most puzzling way. We essentially experience an hour and a half of family drama, but with a very subtle and very evocative paranormal driving force. I think that people will say that this isn't a horror movie, this isn't scary, and while I do think that the trailer kind of frames this movie as something a lot less subtle, those people are wrong. The horror in this film comes from the foggy and the muddy reasoning for the things that are happening, and the exploration of human emotion, when we see those tiny little moments that make up the building blocks of the dynamics of the family, and especially when we dive into the topics of death and grief, and when we're confronting those emotions. I think it would be easy to see this movie as gimmicky, and maybe a bit unnecessary with some of the topics that they touch on, but that was so far from my experience with this movie. I think it also absolutely depends on you as a person, the things that you feel, the things that you have been through, how you were kind of feeling already going into this movie, and how sensitive you are to certain topics. I can definitely see people reacting to this in a lot of different ways and interpreting it in a lot of different ways, similar to I Saw the TV Glow. This, for me, was an outstanding study on human emotion and interaction and how that corresponds when confronted with death and grief, and all of this is on top of a beautiful, haunting contemporary Gothic backdrop. I think with the only negative really being the dialogue here and there, I think that this really is a piece of media to look at when studying how subtleties and nuances can really evoke such strong feelings. This one will get a 9 out of 10 for me, hands down. It really will stick with me for a long time, but I can also see why other people wouldn't necessarily agree with me. There aren't many other films or pieces of media that I would compare this to because it has such a unique identity. But if you're a fan of slow burn horror like Hereditary and Midsummer, I think you'll enjoy this. And if you're also a fan of contemporary Gothic stuff, say like American Horror Story Murder House specifically, and A Haunting of Hill House, and A Ghost Story. If you enjoyed the video, like it, subscribe to the channel, all of that stuff. It really helps us out. And if you have anything to say about the movie, let me know down in the comments, because I know that it has very polarizing opinions, so it'd be cool to have those discussions. I've also written a bit more of a deeper analysis about this movie, so I'll probably be uploading that sometime soon, diving into the kind of deeper meanings and really picking apart the subtleties. So yeah, make sure you subscribe for that, and I'll see you in the next one.